Good evening, everyone. It's your girl Study Smart with Tsumi. So today we're going to continue from where we stopped the last time, which was on a topic called variation in mathematics. So I was only able to touch direct and inverse variation. So for today, I'm going to be touching joint variation and partial variation. So the first one we're going to be doing now is joint variation. Let's just move fast and start with all what we need to do under this topic. So, joint variation. What is joint variation? Joint variation is a form of variation involving three or more variables. I don't know if you guys remember in our last lesson. In direct variation, it was only two variables we were dealing with. Same thing with inverse variation. It was two, but there was a little bit something that is different there. We introduced 1 over in the formula for inverse, but it was also two variables. But now they are not telling us that joint variation, it involves three variables or more. That means it can be 4, 5, 6, 7, any amount. But the most common one I've seen, and they usually set in WAEC, JAMB, and all those external exams, is comprising of three variables. That's the one I've seen most. So let me just move straight. Since we've understood the meaning of joint variation, let's move on to the example under it. So now, reading the example, they said x, y, and z are related such that x varies directly as the cube of y and inversely as the square of z. If x is equal to 108, when y is equal to 3, and z is equal to 4, find z when x is equal to 4000 and y is equal to 10. So let's just break down this question and solve it quickly. So, solution. They said x varies directly as the cube of y. Is it y cube? And inversely as z square. The reason why the z became the denominator is because in inversely, during our last lesson, I told us that inverse is 1 over. So whenever you are writing the formula for inverse, the second variable will come to the denominator, while 1 will be the numerator. So since we are combining this and this, I know for direct, they are equals to each other. It doesn't come down. That means it's basically still the numerator here. So that's why in this question, our y cube, which is directly proportional to this x, is still staying in the numerator, while our z squared, which is inversely, came to the denominator. Meanwhile, there is an invisible 1 here that I multiplied, so you don't need to write 1. So that's how I got the formula. So x is directly proportional to the cube of y and inversely to the squared of z. Simple like that. So let's simplify the formula now. X will now be equals to, when we introduce equals to sign, we'll put our constant there, k. Then you now write back what was in the formula before, y cube over z squared. So this is the formula that we're going to be using. So let's read the question further. And then I said, if x is equals to 108, when y is equals to 3, and z is equals to 4. Let's stop here and solve this simple part first. They said x is now 108. Replace your x with 108. K, we don't know it. Y is 3 in the question. That's the 3 I wrote here. Then raised to power 3. Z is 4 in the question. That's the 4 I wrote here. Then raised to power 2 from here. So, moving on, I wrote the 108 back. K times 3 raised to power 3 is 3 in 3 places over 4 in 2 places. Please don't mind the way I'm ruling and writing. So 108 will now be equals to k. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. K times 27 over 4 times 4 is 16. Cross multiply. So 108 8 times 16 over 27. That's the value of our k. So let me explain how I got 108 times 16. From here now, 108 to multiply 16. This is 108 times 16. Our k and 27 is here. K times 27. So I now divided both sides by 27. That's how I got this part here. So, for JAMB candidates, those that are preparing for JAMB maybe next year or anytime soon, there won't be calculator. And there might be calculator in the system, but I want to teach you guys a fast way to divide that won't waste time or will help you when you don't have a calculator. Okay, so let's divide. Let's start from the smallest number that we know can go. 3 can go here and it can also go here. 3 in 27 is 9. 3 in 108 is 3 in 10 is 3. Remainder 1. 3 in 18 is 6. 3 in 9 is 3. 3 in 36 is 1, 2. 3 here, 1. 3 can still go in 12. That's 4. So, k, therefore, k is equals to, what's the variable that remain here? 4 times 16 is still there. So, therefore, k is equals to 64. No need to waste your time pressing calculator. It's not wastage of time, but JAMB doesn't want to hear that. You can manage your time. With time, you get faster and you'll be able to divide quickly instead of going 3 like how I did. But for clearer understanding, that's why I started like that. So let's move on. Since we've gotten our k, as usual, let's find the formula connecting them. So the formula for connecting them now, from the equation x is equals to ky cube over z squared. This formula. So our x will now be, you've known the value of k, which I got here as 64. This is it. So I now replace it in this formula that we got here. Is it? Okay, this formula here. So I replace it and place the k here as 64. So if they ask you in a question under variation, that the formula connecting them, this is the formula. Connecting x, y, and z. So we're done with that part. Let's now read the last part of the question and solve it. They now said, moving on, find z when x is equals to 4,000 and y is equals to 10. Yes. So let me name that one as I. We should find z. That means we don't know our z. When x is equals to 4,000 and y is equals to 10. So our z will now be, from the formula, x is equals to ky cube over z squared. X is 4,000 now. K is a constant, it doesn't change. So the value we got in the beginning, which is 64, is what we are still going to use. So k is 64 times y, they said is 10 raised to power 3 over z squared, cross multiplied. So 4,000 z squared is equals to 64 times 10 raised to power 3 is 1. They add 3 zeros, so that's 1,000. Divide both sides by 4,000. So 3 zeros will cut each other. It remains 4. 4 can go in 64. 4 in 64 is 16. So z squared is equal to 16. Take the square root of both sides. Square root of z squared, square root of 16. Squared cancel the square root. So therefore, z is equal to square root of 16 is 4. So that's all for this question. Yeah. So guys, let's continue. We've now reached the hard part of the topic. It's not that hard, but most people see it as the difficult part in variation. So that topic is called partial variation. So let's move on. What is partial variation? This is a form of variation expressed as a sum of two or more parts. So I wrote an example down and we're going to solve it together. Let me read down the example. This example you are seeing, guys, is a typical WAEC question. This is what WAEC loves most. You see how much the wordings are. Even if someone sees it, it will be like, wow, where should I start from? But it's actually simple. When I break it down for you guys, you understand it better. So let's read it and solve it step by step. It said, the cost of feeding a number of students during a certain period is partly constant and partly varies directly as the number of students. The cost of feeding 60 students during a certain period is 54,000 naira, and the cost of feeding 100 students during the same period of time is 60,000 naira. Find the cost of feeding 250 students over the same period of time. So, solution. Let me now read back it slowly now and be telling you why I pick all these points under the solution. They said the cost of feeding, that's a variable on its own. They said cost of feeding, that's a variable. So that's why I wrote cost of feeding. So I now replace that variable with a, I can't be writing cost of feeding each time. So I replaced it with a letter C. They now said the cost of feeding, a number of students during a certain period of time is partly constant. That partly constant, I picked it out and replaced it with that K we normally use. So then reading on, they said, and partly varies directly as the number of students. Number of students is also a variable. So I wrote it out as N. They now said partly varies directly. Remember direct variation, where we used to say, for example, X varies directly as Y. So now they are saying that it is partly constant and it also partly varies directly as the number of students. The reason why I am writing another constant here is because they said initially they said there is a constant which is partly constant. The next said and partly varies directly. That means we have two constants in this question. So the first constant is partly constant, while the second one varies directly. And when there is very directly, we introduce a constant. That's where we saw this other constant from. But this one was already mentioned in the question, and that's why we're having two constants for this solution. So note that in partial variation, most of the time it is two constants, two variables, most of the time. So now the two variables in the question, I wrote them out. It is that cost of feeding and number of students, and the two constants are the K and Y. Sorry, that was supposed to be K. So we've solved it to a part now. Let's read further now. They now said the cost of feeding 60 students. Okay, before I do that, let's generate the formula for this question. they said cost of feeding a number of students C during a certain period is, introduce your equals to sign directly, is partly constant. What's that partly constant? K. And partly varies directly. For partial variation, it is plus sign we use. For direct, we used it was multiplication that was there, that we wrote x is equal to ky, like here. It was multiplication that is joining them. For inverse, division 1 over. For joint, we combined direct and the other one, inverse. So for partial, it is plus sign. Let's now read for that. Now say partly constant and partly varies directly as the number of students. Partly varies directly and number of students were together, and it is direct variation. So it is going to be the combination of the two like this here. So it's going to be n y, n multiplied by y. So n y. So let's read it and see if it rhymes with this formula that I generated. The cost of feeding a number of students C during a certain period of time is equals to, is partly constant and partly varies directly as the number of students. This is the formula we're using. So the first person now said the cost of feeding 60 students during a certain period is 54,000 naira. Let's first do that one. So they said the cost of feeding 60 students during a certain period is 54,000 naira. That means C is 54,000 naira and the number of students is 60. So the formula that we generated, C is equals to K plus NY. C now is 54,000 is equals to K constant, we don't know, plus number of students is 60. We don't know the other constant too. Why? Let's now read the question further. They now said, and the cost of feeding 100 students during the same period of time is 60,000 naira. This is the first equation that we derive, equation 1. Using this formula again, C is equal to K plus NY. The cost of feeding this one now, they said is 60,000 naira and it is for 100 students. So 60,000 naira is equals to, we don't know the constant. The number of students for this one is 100 and Y. So equation 2. So combine the two, 54, the two equations together. And solve them either simultaneously or using elimination. But I prefer elimination method because it is faster. Let's use elimination method. We can use subtraction. Because they are both KK. Let's say this was 2, like 2 was here. And the coefficient of this one was 1 and this one was 2. I have to multiply each line by the coefficient, this one by the coefficient of this, and this one by the coefficient of this. But for this, it is easier because the coefficient of both is 1. So just look at what sign is there. There's an invisible plus here and plus here. So what will cancel it? We're going to use minus. If I had used plus, it is only going to add them up. It's not going to eliminate them away. But by using minus, it's going to eliminate this and this. So let me subtract this from this. Most of the time, I subtract the bigger one from the smaller one. This is bigger than this, 60,000 than this. Let's say I did it the other way around. I'll have gotten negative sign, and I want to avoid negative sign. So this will cancel this, because if minus, you multiply the plus sign here to become minus, and there's plus here. So plus will cancel minus, plus K minus K. They will cancel each other. 60,000 minus 54,000 is 6,000. Is now equals to 100y minus 60y is 40y. Divide both sides by 40. That will be, therefore, y is equals to 150. And cancel the amount of 4 in 600 is 150. So that's for that part. So we're not done. Since we've gotten our y, we're now going to put it in one of the equations, either this one or this one. So I'm going to pick this second equation. 60,000 is equals to k plus 100y. So 60,000 now be equals to k plus 100 times, we've gotten our y now, 150. So 60,000 now be equals to k plus 15,000. So plus will come to the other side, turn into minus. So 60,000 minus 15,000 is equals to k. So therefore, k is equals to 60 minus 15 is 45,000. So we've gotten our two constants, y and k. So let's now read the question for that. They now said that find the cost of feeding 250 students over the same period of time. So number of students now, this is the real question we're meant to solve, is 250. So we're looking for cost. We know the two constants, which doesn't change. The first constant k is 45,000. Second constant y is 150. So the formula again, c is equals to k plus ny. So c is what we're looking for. K is 45,000 plus n, number of students 250, times y 150. So therefore c will now be equals to naira 82,500. That's the answer for this long question. Yeah. So guys, that's where I'm going to stop for today. In the next class, I'm not going to be able to solve a question from series today. So the next class will be solving some questions on variation. That is WAEC past question. So thank you guys for watching, and please like, subscribe, comment, share, do everything to help me grow my page, please. Thank you guys.